totally, definitely did my homework and definitely prepared answers for those
Yeah, of
questions.
course, right? You don't need to just go for it. It doesn't really matter. Whatever you say, I'll be like, yeah, no worries.
Perfect.
That's so cool. All right. Well, I'll get into my side of things. So, hello, all, and welcome to the Indie Author Life Show. I'm your host, MG Hunt, and today I'm here with a very talented writer and creative professional who has an immense love for storytelling, which is Jade Andrews. That is the pen name for our lovely Alana. So, thank you. Yay, yay. Thank you so
Hello.
much, Jade slash Alana, for being here. Alana has graciously given us her time today to chat all things writing and indie author life related, as well as some insights into her latest creative pursuits. So, yes, welcome, welcome,
Thanks for
Alana
having
Jade.
me.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you so much for accepting my request for you to come on this show today and
Oh
have a
my God,
yap.
I was so excited. As soon as you mentioned it, I was like, I've got to. So much
Oh,
fun.
I'm just so curious to hear all about your writing pursuits, but also a lot of the creative writing, occupational
Hmm.
background sort of stuff as well, because I know that you have recently, maybe recent, but I'm sure it's been in the back of your mind about your own publishing and marketing work that you offer for other indie authors, which is so exciting.
Yeah, I mean, like every project that we do, right? There's a year of backlog of hidden
Yes.
work to what then suddenly shows up on the page. But yeah, there's a lot been going on in the last year that's exciting to now, see it coming into the real world. So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
always excited to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm excited for you because it really does feel like, particularly in your world, that maybe 2025 is a real fresh start
Mm.
from some stuff that's happened in the past and getting your business up and running, and also maybe making the time for writing as well, because I'm sure you're working on drafts and things in the background too, if that's correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think like we kind of joke about it. We've just launched Coven Press, which is very exciting, but we joke that we all had very humble beginnings in hybrid publishing.
Yep.
And if you know anything about the publishing world, like hybrid's pretty, you know, hit or miss, very
Hit or
fluctuating,
miss.
got a lot of issues in there.
Yep.
And it was quite a learning experience, I think, for all of us, and allowed us that introduction into the world, but very quickly kind of showed us that like that wasn't the it didn't feel like a very holistic journey for, I think, independent authors and self-publishing authors.
Mm.
And it wasn't something that we felt like comfortable working in that dynamic of.
Yeah.
So we sort of started conceptualizing Coven Press as this like sort of open door method of, obviously self-published authors deserve to tell their stories as much as anybody else. Like I'm
Mm.
self-published. We see all these indie authors and there's phenomenal stories out there.
Yeah.
Um, but we know that self-published authors have to take that initiative themselves and they have to source those designers and the editors and everything like that. And it can
Everything.
be a bit of a headache trying to like navigate a bunch of different people or a bunch of different points of contact or honestly even knowing where to start sometimes,
Yep.
right? Like there's so
Totally.
much information and
Hmm.
potential avenues into it. Um, so we just really like the idea of like having like a basically like an author services, like a
Yeah.
self-publishing services spot where it's like we've got a team,
Mm.
we do everything across the board. We've got marketing, we've got, layout, we've got covers, we've got editors.
Hmm.
Um, and being able to offer either or, able to
Yeah.
offer like a fully comprehensive thing, or hey, you've got a team, but you're just looking for that solid editor, like
Yeah.
try one of ours. We can do
Yep.
we can do just one service.
Yeah.
Um,
It's great. It's
so
tailor-made for
exactly,
self-publishers. Yep. Yep. That's awesome.
exactly, and trying to work within, knowing that it's, you know, self-published budgets as well that we're working with and trying to be
Yeah.
as accommodating as we can there and just loving it. We just love it. So it was
Yeah.
like
You can tell. I
when
can tell.
yeah, when it was like when there was 2024 was definitely like um the transition of things and there was a lot
Yeah.
of sadness around like as much as I was like, oh, hybrid publishing, it's not for me,
Hmm.
and having to make that call, there was a lot of sadness around not getting to work with pip books every day.
Yeah, the community
Um,
had kind of it did taint a lot of the community that had been
yeah,
part of the ride that you in particular had worked with. And I think
yeah,
that that has I think it hopefully or optimistically has started
mm.
to reform and become even stronger with
I think
your
so too.
guidance.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm very
yeah.
optimistic about it. I think
Yeah.
people that write for the you know for the right reasons, I suppose. People that write because they just need to write, like will always pick themselves up and will keep going and will find community.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
community is the best part of
It
all of
is.
it. Like
It
it's so
really
much fun.
is. It has been the biggest, almost like a, I didn't realize how important the community was for,
Mm.
I'm just thinking about Bookstagram on the social
Yeah.
media side of things, how supportive everyone, I know I've probably rabbited on about this before, but how supportive everyone is to
Mm.
just hype each other up. I was at a book event recently for SK Stappa's book, The
Hmm.
Midnight Gate, and she had so many people there that were from her book club as well, but
Mm.
also from the marketing that she had done. I mean, heck, I was there because I saw the link
Yeah,
to it
because
on her
she's
Instagram.
self-published as well, isn't she?
That's right.
She's yeah, which is
Yeah.
phenomenal. That's
Yeah.
such a good turnout. I did see all the sort of posts about it.
Yeah, but
Um,
you saw heaps because there were lots of
yes.
people from the Bookstagram community posting about it and giving that hype. And yeah, it was such a great experience to be a part of. And I think we're going to see more and more people turning up and supporting where you can based on which
Mm,
city you are. Because with
that's yeah.
yeah, with this one it was in Melbourne, which was good for me, but you're based in regional Victoria, is that right?
Mm,
Yeah, still around there.
yeah.
So then there'll be other things, another uh yeah, the accessibility of heading into Melbourne versus regional
Mm.
city experiences too
And
is
it's
always
so
homework.
different
Mm.
with where you go as well. Like I've found in different positive ways, but last year I did a little bit of traveling to different events. I went to Sydney
Yes, you went to
for
Sydney.
yeah, which was
Yeah.
I was like, let me just give it a go.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
And yeah, I did a couple of events sort of around, mostly around regional Vic and some in Melbourne. But yeah, going up to Sydney and then seeing like the difference in their book communities there. And then I know a
Mm.
bunch of the authors there. Um, and getting to meet the Sydney authors as well was a lot of fun. But a bunch of the authors there
Nice.
then proceeded up to Queensland because there was like more events going on in Queensland after that. And so
Yes.
there's so
Definitely
many
Brisbane.
communities out there, and each time you just sort of um
Learn
there's
new
names that
things.
pop up, but you go to a new place and you're like, oh my God, there's this whole new world of indie
Yeah.
authors that I haven't even seen. Like,
Jeez, you've
let's
been
get
well
everybody
traveled.
collected.
Because I haven't been to any other book events besides ones that are in
Mm,
pretty much Melbourne regional Vic, so I need to get onto it. And I mean, the whole is it romantic affair? A romantic affair that happened in
hmm.
Adelaide. I know I spoke about this before, but I was like, oh my God, I'm so jealous. I
Yeah,
wish I was
I
there.
know. And I think that links back to sort of what I was talking about earlier as well with like the community of it. And we spoke really, really briefly about like how amazing it is that you're doing this podcast for indie authors as well. But
Ah, I love it.
I think there's people now that are really seeing the community, and there's people that are launching these events for the first time.
Yeah.
And so the calendar's getting stacked,
Oh,
right? Like
oh, it's getting
there's a
booked.
lot of events out there.
That's
And it's
great.
amazing. It's so fantastic seeing
Yeah.
just groups of people being like, I could throw a book event. Why can't I
Yeah.
throw a book event?
That's
Um,
right. That's
and
right.
there's, next
Yeah.
year there's Adelaide. There's more in Adelaide. There's a lot more in around like there's a big Cryle Castle one that happened this year that's
Yeah.
happening again. Obviously Sydney and you know Comic-Con and all of the things, but there's
Yeah.
so many indie ones as well, which is
Yeah.
just it's just the community. It's just the
Yeah.
community is insane.
Yeah,
Like
it's a good
so
community.
supportive.
It is a very supportive and encouraging community that we're a part of. So
Yeah,
I'm
definitely.
thankful that, even us too, we've been able to connect pretty much through social media.
Yeah.
Met once in person, a book event in, I'm just trying to think, it was last year. I think that's when I picked up
Was it
Pantheon.
Clunes?
I think it was Clunes. Yeah.
Clunes, maybe,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah.
That's
I
where it
still have that.
debuted.
Oh, that's when it
That's when
debuted.
it debuted. Yep.
Yeah,
That was its release
nice.
day. So,
Yes. Oh, can you
yes.
remember all those months ago where it was
Oh,
released? Yeah. And yeah,
Clunes was so much fun. Yeah.
it was an awesome event. I did enjoy going and meeting yourself and I think Anthony as well that was on your
Anthony would have
table.
been there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
And met
back with
Simone.
him again
Yeah.
this year,
Oh,
um,
great.
at Clunes. So
Yep.
we've got a little fantasy tent going on. So we've got
Oh,
myself and
perfect.
Anthony, and I think there's six others,
Nice.
all sort of Ballarat locals. So
Yep,
there's
Ballarat
they're all,
locals.
yeah, we'll all be in a fantasy tent. And I know there's a bunch of the people that were in the tent last year who have
Oh, yeah.
created then their own bigger tents, and so there's
Oh,
quite a lot of big tents going out there
awesome.
this coming year. So.
Yes, head down to Clunes. Is it in March?
Yeah.
End of March? Is that
Yes,
right? Yep.
22nd, 23rd of March.
Yep.
It's a lot of fun. Surprisingly, I meet a lot of book lovers who don't know what it is even, but
Yeah.
like if you
It's
haven't
huge.
heard of it, go because
Yeah.
it literally is like this beautiful pioneer town. They shut
Yeah.
down every street of the town and they
Yeah.
just put bookstalls and book marquees and authors and they line up everything for the whole weekend with just books.
It's
Um,
awesome. It's a
and you
great
just walk
vibe.
around the town. It's so
Yeah.
much fun.
It's great for kids as well. I noticed that
Mm-hmm.
too, where, families will be there, lots of different activities for kids, but also for
Mm.
adults who read as well. And there's
Live
also
music
live
as well.
music,
Yep.
food as well.
Mm-hmm.
Love the food that was there. I think I had
Yep.
some I think it was like Nepalese food or some like
Yeah, they've got all the
yeah.
food trucks and yeah,
It's
it's a good
good.
vibe. It's a
Yep.
good vibe.
It's a really good vibe. I think everyone needs to check it out. But before we talk more about the book things, we should get into yourself, Jade
Mm.
Andrews. We should talk about a little bit about who you are. And I'm wondering if you can share a bit about your background and where you grew up and things
Mm.
like that. Whatever you want to share.
Gosh.
Loaded
Well,
question.
where has Jade Andrews been?
Yes.
Um, no, so um I grew up pretty even more rural than I am now, believe it or not. I grew up like up near Mildura.
Yep.
And so very much just was a, kind of standard upbringing in a really, really small town.
Yeah.
And moved to Melbourne pretty much as soon as I turned 18.
Okay. Where did you move
Went,
in Melbourne?
um, gosh, where
The
did I move in
north
Melbourne?
or?
I think I moved pretty outer to begin with, like closer to
Yeah.
Werribee.
Yep. Yep.
And I was
Yep.
initially studying, I initially jumped into a science degree, which I was a little bit
Wow.
of a science nerd in high school. And so I
Yeah,
initially jumped into a
right.
science and stats degree. Um,
Interesting.
and then got like maybe half a year to a year in, and I was like, I don't think I want to study just yet. So I dropped out of uni,
Yep.
and I just kind of we ended up moving into Melbourne. We
Yes.
moved to Southside originally, like Paran Turaki area,
Yeah, right. Yep.
which was a
Mm-hmm.
big change for
That's
a
a
little country gal.
massive
Um,
change. Would have been busy,
it was
hectic.
busy, and we were like right off Chapel Street. Um,
Oh,
yeah,
yes. For
but it was
those
a lot of
who,
fun.
yeah, who don't know much about Melbourne, Chapel Street is definitely where you spend a lot of time on your Saturday nights
Yeah,
and
specifically, the Friday,
oh yeah, Friday.
I joke that there was a lot of people that you'd see stumble out Friday
Yep.
night and stumble back Monday morning. It was very much
Exactly.
that kind of whole
That's the
weekend
vibe. I
ordeal.
mean, it's
Yeah.
still a nice vibe, and there's lots of good coffee and lots of good places to eat, but
Oh,
it's
yes.
loud.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
is loud.
Party time.
Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
kind of lived there for a little bit. Took a couple of years just working and generally living
Yeah.
life as an 18 to 20-year-old before I sort of was like felt that itch to like learn again.
Yeah.
And when I really started to feel that, I was like, I had to have the sit down talk with myself of like, okay,
Yeah.
what do you want to do? Like, what's the thing, right? And
Yep.
I have always written, when
Yeah.
you write, like you spend your childhood writing. So
Yeah.
I've always had that as a constant.
Mm.
Um, and I was like, okay, but if I do that, like I'm not making much money out of an arts degree. Like I'm doing this just for passion, right?
I feel you.
Um, but I went for it anyway, and I had a lot of fun. And I end up
Yeah.
somewhere in there moving to the north side of Melbourne, which I
Yep.
really vibed with a lot more.
Yep.
Had a really great time living there
Hmm.
for quite a while. Finished
Yep.
my bachelor's in creative arts,
Yep.
and then yeah, lived the inner north Melbourne life for a
It's
while,
pretty nice there.
and then met a Ballarat man, of all things, and just kind of lined up at the time. I was like, nah, I think I'm ready to go back a little bit rural, not great,
Yeah.
like not where Mildura was, but an hour or two out of Melbourne I can do.
Yeah. Ballarat's
And so
great. It's got everything.
yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's blossoming in
It
recent
is.
years. So
Yep.
yeah, moved out to Ballarat, and somewhere in there, I'm quite an impulsive person, so somewhere in there I was like, I'm gonna do my master's, and then I signed up for my master's and did that.
Great.
And yeah, was really just especially when I got into my master's, I was really geared towards trying to get into publishing
Yeah.
specifically.
Yep.
Because I'd been writing that whole time, and I'd been doing sort of a little bit of like freelance like work here and there, whether it be editing or kind of layouts and stuff like that, but I hadn't really committed to getting into the publishing industry
Yeah.
until I started my master's, and then
Then you
got
got into
into
the
that,
industry.
got into the industry, and yeah,
Yeah, that's
went from
amazing.
there.
You're probably the first person that I've spoken to that has also published their own books, but has a professional background in things to do with
Yeah.
publishing. Because a lot of the time, and maybe I'm not the best example because I do graphic design as my full-time
hmm
job, but that does link into
Yeah, quite a lot.
stuff. Yeah, so it
Yeah.
might not be writing every day, but there is a link there. But most people that I've spoken to, it's their day job is nothing to do
Wildly
with
different. Yeah.
wildly different, lots of
Well, I
teachers.
think like in a sense it was getting into the publishing world that showed me
Mm,
um this isn't like there's a lot of elements. There's a lot of really fantastic elements in the publishing world. There's a lot of elements in the publishing world that's really gate kept that shouldn't be. And I think it really showed me like this is not um the logistics of it, right? Like
yeah.
we're not talking necessarily marketing, we're not talking being a successful author,
Yep.
somebody who makes a bunch of money or whatever. Just the logistics of publishing
Yep.
is not um out of anybody's reach. Like
Yeah.
it's not out of anybody's capabilities.
Yep.
And it working in the publishing world really showed me that like, oh, there's a lot of money being made off of people not knowing what's going on.
Yes. So true.
Um,
Yep.
and
Totally.
I don't like that. I have
No,
never liked that. I'm like, no,
no, it's not right.
people should be, you can still make money working in the publishing world, but it should be because people want to work with you, not because they
Yeah.
have to work with you.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's become
so
so slimy in some instances
yeah,
and
in
weirdly,
some pockets for
yeah.
sure.
Yep. Yeah. Not
So
all.
when
But
I
yeah.
got into it, I was like, nah, like this is I want to do this for a job, but I want to do this kind of like in a way that feels good for me as a person too. Like I want to
Oh,
feel
yeah. Yep.
like I can sleep well, and
Yes.
I've successfully
Yeah.
given shown and led an author through to the process of having their dream book, like something that works for
Yeah.
them, because
Yeah.
they're never going to do the hard steps afterwards, and
No.
they are afterwards, right? The marketing and continuing when you're sitting there being like, I've made
Oh,
zero sales for 3 months, like continuing when that's happening.
yeah.
You're
To
never going
show
to
up.
do that if you're like, well, I don't believe in my book either. So,
Yes, exactly. You
you
have
know,
to be realistic with that, which, there can be that element of, you get sold a dream where I'll
mm,
publish this book and this momentous achievement will equate to quote unquote fame and riches.
yeah.
And which, to be fair, it is a momentous achievement to write a book.
Oh,
Full stop.
just to write a book.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. But we don't have to equate, you know, turning it into something that is so, yeah, I guess lucrative and
Hmm.
bigger than anything to be successful. I think
Yeah.
getting it out there and publishing, I often have to remind myself that too, when sometimes, yeah, I do get in my head thinking, oh, yeah, I just do this and whatever, like it's fun for me to do. But then when I talk to other people about it, I say, oh, if they don't really know what I do, I write books. I mean, I'm very
Mm.
slow at it, but I do it. And sometimes people just go, "Oh, wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing." And you don't realize when you're in the community, that's just what
It's
you do. But other
yeah.
people are so impressed by that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. I
Mm,
think there's so many I mean there's so many ways into like the author's mind and appeasing the things that we always tell ourselves. But the one I find myself coming back to, oddly enough, is like
mm,
when I do go through like, being like, oh my gosh, like I'm to go through all this marketing and the sales, like sometimes the sales are slow and sometimes they're not. And
yeah.
when you start to get like disheartened with that,
Yeah.
my brain's like, well, but you're gonna write anyway. Like you're
Yes.
gonna write the story anyway, so why not just put it out there and maybe two people will read it,
Yep.
but you're writing it anyway. Like
Achieving your dream by doing
why
it.
not?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's more than what other people can do because a lot of people will set out there to with the intention to write the book, but it's a totally new thing and impressive thing to do it. It's really hard. It's really hard. I've
Yeah.
learned that way, and it's you put a lot of passion into it, but there's also opportunities for yeah, maybe you release a book and the sales numbers aren't where you expected. Well, that's not the only book that I hope that you're going to write. I'm
Yeah.
sure you're going to keep writing and doing more and more books. And I have to remind myself that too, even though it's so
Yeah.
much hype about releasing a book. It's not the end. There's going to be
It's not
more
the end.
books. There's going
And
to be
the
more
more
books.
you like, from then the marketing perspective, the more you do write,
Yeah.
the better chance you have, right? The better
Yeah.
chance you have of being found and of people then discovering you and being like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I wonder what else this author has." And if
Yeah.
you only
Keep
have one
growing.
book, they're going to be like, "Oh,
Oh, that's it.
okay, I guess that's it."
Yeah.
But if they
And if
find you and they're like, "Oh my God, I love this author," and then they turn around and you're like, "Yep, I'm 6 books in." Like they're like, "Brilliant, I've got 6 books to read." Like,
Yeah, let me check out
yep,
the whole
feeds in.
catalog. It reminds
Yeah,
me of uh the Fourth Wing author, Rebecca
Rebecca, yeah, Yaros, yeah,
Yaros. Now I believe,
yeah.
and I could be like corrected on this, but she wrote a lot of books before
I think
she
so. Yeah,
yeah, before she released the Fourth Wing, which has now turned into, a behemoth. It's like on its own.
absolutely.
Lots of success, but I think she started off as self-published and writing romance novels like that,
I was
which,
gonna say, I think it was
yeah,
romance. I think there was.
yeah,
I've seen a lot of people go back and be like, "Oh my God, her romance books that was so
yeah,
good." Like, and yeah, I'd never seen
yeah.
any of them until I'd seen
There you go.
Fourth Wing. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So it's just keep churning it out as much as you can and not be dissuaded by the weird, I don't know, like standard that we set for ourselves of achieving fame and fortune and
yeah.
all this kind of crap.
It's such
It's
a mind game, isn't it? Because
it
you got
is.
like, you don't like on the average day, you don't sit there being like, "Oh, I do this because I want to be a bestseller." Like, I don't.
Yeah.
Most
Who
authors I
does
meet
that?
don't say that, and they don't believe
No.
that. They actually like, yeah, there's a little part of your brain that's like, "Man, I'd love it
It'd
if,"
be
but like,
amazing.
uh, when I talk to authors, they don't. that's never like the motivation that they have behind publishing their books.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and yet we'll still hold ourselves to that standard sometimes and let it beat us down when we're not like that successful,
Yep.
even though it's like, but we don't, that's not our main passion here, and you express
No.
that that's not your main passion here.
Yep.
So why are we letting ourselves like judge ourselves against that scale
That's
when
right.
that's not the scale that means the most to us?
No, and it's not the reason why we started in the first
Yeah,
place. We
exactly.
we started, and I'm sure it's probably the same for you. I started because it was like a compulsion. I was like,
Yeah.
I cannot keep going with all these ideas in my head and not do
Hmm.
something with them. I tried to do a graphic novel to satiate that
Oh my
desire,
gosh.
but no, it didn't work out. Like,
Yeah,
just
that's a big
no.
undertaking, though, to be fair. There's so many elements in,
Massive.
not that there isn't in writing a novel,
That's
but
different.
there's so many elements into a graphic novel because you have also got, it's a whole different way of telling a story, right?
Oh
You've
yeah.
got the dialogue and some action, but you very much, the pictures have to tell the story as
Pictures
well.
have to be high quality and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
I couldn't cut it. Like I was just trying my best to try and express what I wanted to just for like a short story. And then I thought, oh, well, I'll just
Mm.
write instead because I'm the same as you were. I did an arts degree, but it
Mhm.
focused more on the sociology part of
Yeah.
things and all that. So I thought, oh, well, I'm not a writer. Like all I do is write academic stuff back in the day. And then I switched and, had to sit down with myself and I was like, what do I
Yeah.
really want to do? Let's think about, okay, I want to do
It's
some
always a
more art
conversation
stuff.
with yourself.
Always. So I was like, all right, do the graphic design diploma and get into that. But then the writing, it just never went away. It was just there.
Yeah.
So I just had to do it. And I was doubting myself, thinking, well, how the hell am I going to write? Like, I just don't think I've never
Mm.
tried this before. So how can I do it? But you just do it, try your
Just do
best,
it.
and things happen the way they happen. If that compulsion there doesn't go, you should give it a
Yeah.
go and try. And it's exactly what
Yeah.
you said about, then when you think about publishing, it's a lot more accessible than perhaps it might have been in your head before you tried to do it.
Mm.
So, yeah, it's very exciting to see a lot of people getting into it as well who, yeah, just give it a go. I did want to ask you a question about your writing process,
Mhm.
if it is something you want to talk about, because I know you're busy
Yeah.
with some other stuff too, but if you are still finding some time to write and maybe working on the sequel, hopefully,
I
for
am.
yes, what does your
Yes.
routine kind of look like?
Oh, I
If there is
I
one.
actually have said to pretty much everybody in my life in the last month, that writing the second book has taught me a lot about what I need my routine to look like. Not what it currently looks like,
Mm-hmm.
but what it needs to look like. Because this second book has been so much harder than the first. It has been it's to be fair, it is a um it's darker. It's got a lot more like internal like work, I think, in it from
Yeah.
myself as an author, but also for the characters.
Yeah.
Um, and I joke like, the author shouldn't be in the should the author's separate from the thing, but like I think a lot of me
It's your
really did come
voice.
into this second book, and that
Yeah.
I think it was somewhat unavoidable. But
Yep.
um, I it's shorter even, and it took me
Interesting.
this whole time to it's just with the editor now, and I'm trying to get it to a Clunes
Ah.
release, which is like a
Whoa.
month from now.
Good luck.
Um
Oh, I hope you, I'm sure
so
you can do it. Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate that the things after the edit are all things that I can do and that I can
Yep.
do like in my sleepless nights. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's writing it was really, really tough, and
Yeah.
um I'm very much a pantser.
Yep.
So
Me
I
too.
wait for the vibe, I wait for the inspiration. I have I have the plot points and I have the things that I need to hit.
Yep.
But
how to get there. That's,
It's yeah,
very
and
cool.
I had to because the second book um has so many elements. There was a lot of links and foreshadows. If you pick up on them in the first book or not, it's all
Mm.
good. But there's a
Hmm.
lot of things in the first book that I had to follow up on, and there was a lot of things that I needed to set up for in
Yes.
the next book. So there was this is probably the most like logistical um piece as well, and trying to figure out how to make sure that lined up and it made sense and the plotting that did have to go into it. I left my writing or I got stuck on my writing quite a lot because I was really like, no, it's got to make sense, it's got to be perfect, all of these things. And
Yeah.
I ended up just kind of having most of my writing groups towards the end of the year, which I don't think was the right thing. I think I need to like I joke now, like I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have like my word count that I have to hit each month of every
Oh,
year.
yeah, that's a good
Um,
idea. Before we continue talking about Pantheon of Life 2, are you able just to give us a quick rundown about what one was like, as much as you can give away
yes.
in case people haven't read it?
I
Entice them
always
to.
I always struggle with this question
Yeah.
and I'm and having done a lot of events and still having to put my blurb out there and everything, I it's always a struggle, but yeah, it is a fantasy.
Yep.
It's obviously the first of a series. It's loosely, loosely inspired by Greek mythology. And when I say that is if you are a traditional Greek mythology fan, you it has a lot of deviation.
Yep.
I've taken a lot of liberties, but that's what fantasy is. I think
That's
it's a lot of
fantasy.
fun to just ex like take elements we like
Yeah.
and explore with it.
Yeah, make it
So it
different.
doesn't. It's very much like utilizing the pantheon that exists,
Yep.
and a lot of the characters that I really have like grown up kind of loving and
Hmm.
reading stories about. But then having a lot of my own sort of like make-believe characters in there and my own, very much my own like make-believe world as well.
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and yeah, it just follows, in particular, one of the goddesses, Azrael,
Hmm.
and it follows a couple of mortal, it follows a particular mortal kingdom that she, um, is essentially cast down into. She's essentially charged for something that she didn't do, and she's cast out of the realm of the gods, and she falls into this mortal kingdom and is swept up into this mortal circle of people.
Hmm.
And it's I describe it more as like a character-driven
Yeah.
story. I think it's a lot more about the way that the characters interact with each other. It's a lot more about um really
Definitely.
Asriel's like internal struggles with being outcast from her kind, but also like, again, a lot of foreshadowing of like what's to come. Like there's a lot of references in there about um her like interpersonal
Yeah.
stuff that she's got with her family
Yep.
um and her kind even.
Yeah.
And it's about her sort of, the first book is really she has lost everything that she's ever known. And now she's got to be like, do I want to pick up and keep going? Or like, what does that even look like? I've got literally no idea.
Yep.
And yeah, she meets some princes that maybe have a little bit more to them than they seem. And yeah, there's Zeus doing some bad things as Zeus tends to do in most of
Yeah.
these stories. So there's some early brewing elements to what feels like it's going to be a big war or something. Something is happening, but we
Hmm.
don't quite know.
No.
Um, and so yeah, it's very much just Asriel's into like
Yeah.
very
Her
personal
thoughts.
journey of like finding herself with nothing outside of a world that she never could have predicted losing and
Yeah.
deciding sort of where to go from there,
Yeah, and it
basically.
was a great journey to watch that internal dialogue. Everything that you said, yeah, it came across amazingly in. the book I'm
I'm
reading.
glad to hear it.
Everything that you said matches up with the book
Yes.
description. But yeah, no, following her journey, and it's a powerful journey because yeah, there's like an added sort of like, okay, if you came from nothing and you were not a god, goddess,
Mm,
you stumbled across another kingdom. That's its own challenge, but there are
mm.
so many more challenges to do with wielding a certain status and power that come into this new world where
Yeah.
does anyone really get her? And if they do,
Yeah.
there are some that do, and she can help in some ways. But yeah, I won't say too much more because,
Yeah.
there's people that need to
Yeah, and
go ahead.
I think
Yeah, I love that.
I've always just loved exploring like the concept of relationships
Yep.
um you
Yeah.
know intergenerational trauma and like
Yeah.
all of the
Totally.
nitty-gritty things that hurt.
Yeah.
And I think having that like character-driven like um story rather than like there's not a there's the introductions of plot, there's the introductions of the big world ramification,
Yep.
but it very much is this like we're setting up a series in this book.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I'm
And
excited for.
yeah, there's a lot of like I just really love exploring like people
Yeah.
and their relationships in the
Yeah.
fantasy setting. I love the fantasy setting, but I just froth a good character
Me
driven
too.
story.
And I think it's important to balance those two things because sometimes we can see flickers of a character. I'm just thinking on the fly about like other books that
Mm,
I've read that maybe don't have as much attention to detail put into the character development. And personally, this is just a personal opinion.
mm,
I was talking to some other friends about this, maybe my sister as well. But I feel like there's been a lot of development in the way that we talk about female characters and write
mm,
female characters, which, of course, we need to keep on pushing that. But when it comes
absolutely.
to the male characters, sometimes there have been some books that I've read that are very popular and published
Mm,
by, big names that I feel like the male character just didn't like. We need to explore a little bit more about that, I feel,
yeah,
because there are some tropes that are just a bit outdated, I feel. If I'm talking about like the romance
yeah.
part of it too. But I felt that with your character, is it Zadrian?
Zadrian, yeah.
Zadrian.
Yep.
I could see the attention to detail that you're putting into really explore his character development as well. And I'm sure there's going to be some more
Yeah.
of that in number two.
I'm excited for him being the author and knowing the trajectory of these characters' lives roughly.
Oh yeah, you
I'm really
know.
excited for him because I
Yep.
think um not so much in the second book, but in the third book, um, we know that there's a really big difference. We see it play out as a conflict in the first book, I think,
Yep.
between Az and Adrian. We know there's a big difference between them. We know, she's a goddess. She's been alive for how long? And this is like a nearly 30-year-old man who's like, I've got it
Mm-hmm.
figured out, and he just
Yep.
doesn't.
We say
And
that all the time.
like he is stubborn and
Yep.
he is naive, and he's got a lot of flaws to him. And I think, logically to make these characters make sense, he has got she's got a lot to go through too, but he has
Yeah.
got a lot to go through to really
Yes.
begin to understand things,
Absolutely.
and to be able to like meet her on that
I was
level
just thinking,
together.
you took the words out of my mouth. I was thinking, meet her halfway,
Yeah.
more so. Yeah, so with you there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Because he's very black and white. He's very,
yeah,
this is right and this is wrong. And Azriel's like, it's not always right or wrong. Like, there's so
especially
much,
in the immortal
like,
world.
exactly. Um, and I don't
Mm,
think that they would ever, I don't know exactly how their story ends, but there's never, I don't think there's a world where they end together where he hasn't done that work
yeah,
to be able to see the shades of grey and to
absolutely.
kind of mature quite a lot, which obviously means trauma because how else do you mature, right?
That's right.
So
It
Zadrian's
takes
gonna go
time.
through it.
Yeah, and I think
Um,
that will make for a great story two
Yeah.
when we read number two. And it's exciting that you've dropped the hint slash pretty much just said that will be a third book in the series. It will be a
Yes,
trilogy, I'm guessing.
it's I always planned for it to be a trilogy, but going back, I guess, to how I've written the second one, it's changed quite a bit in terms of its
Interesting.
structure. And I think that's what
Yeah.
took the most amount of time, honestly,
Yeah.
in writing this one. Because I had an idea, I had a very, very clear idea of how I was going to be structuring it. And then that kind of felt like I was writing it and I was pushing through things and I was like, it's not feeling right. It's not like
Mm.
it, like I'm a very instinctual writer, I think,
Yep.
and it either feels right or it doesn't. And if it doesn't feel right, then I'm like, I actually can't write this scene. Like I
Yep.
can't do it.
No.
And there were scenes that I sat there for weeks looking at the same last sentence of and just being like,
It's
I'm looking at
tough.
the page and nothing's happening.
No.
Um, and it was only when I sort of had like stepped back and started looking at the structure of things again and changing my
Yes.
mind about the structure and being like, no, okay, I think that makes sense to do this way. And so there was probably three or four main like pivots of structure in book
Yeah.
two,
Yeah.
that kept opening up the next sort of writing for me.
Yep.
And even now, like it's kind of very stressful, but even like sending it to my editor, we are currently navigating hopefully what is the last like
Run
broach
through
of the
and all that.
structure,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
even still, like we were still debating some things, um,
Yeah. So it could
and
change
so
again.
yeah,
Yeah.
we're really deciding like how to round out what we've got on the page, basically,
Yeah.
um, and that is
It's
that's
a
been the
challenge.
hardest thing for
Yeah.
sure,
Maybe
but
that
it
was the hardest thing that you feel about writing in particular, where it is
yeah,
like the which way do I go? I've got
yep,
this roadblock ahead of me where you intrinsically just can't move past. But I really like how you are able to overcome that by stepping back and looking at the entire body of work that you wrote before,
yeah,
because that's what we do in graphic design. I'm speaking for myself
mm,
here. It's like if you spend so much time looking at the details, sometimes you have to just like take a step away from it, maybe even for like 10 minutes or so. I'm thinking about like
mm,
short term kind of stuff. Then when
mm,
you come back to it, you're like, okay, that's got to change. I can see it
yeah,
clearer now. Yeah, if you don't have
and
anyone else to bounce off. Mm.
trust the relief, honestly. Like I'm so thankful I've got a bit more of a team around the actual writing element this time,
Yeah,
which I didn't have in Pantheon. Shout out to my Coven Press girlies,
I can
who are
imagine.
invaluable.
Yeah,
They have been fantastic. They've been reading along as we go and
that's amazing.
having a bit more of an ability to go back and forth, with some early readers, right?
Yep.
And being like, what's landing, what isn't, and figuring out like, oh, that thing that I tried to convey, I didn't convey at all, so let's fix that up. But also like, how do we make this really feel like a fully
Mm.
enclosed story? And I think when we made each of those decisions, there's a feeling of like um the weight being lifted and you're like, oh,
Yeah,
okay, that was the right call. And you've
that
got to
was the right
trust
call.
that. Like
You got to trust it. Yep. Yep.
but it
That's where
does
it
mean
goes for
that
you. Mm.
yeah, it does
Mm.
mean that it might be four books with the way that it's split.
I'm
We'll
excited.
see. We'll see. There's
Yeah.
in fact, I'm probably if it wraps up if we wrap up this second one the way that I feel like we are, and it is yes, it is concerning that we're still debating that question a month out from release.
I
Um,
love it. I love
but if we're
it.
wrapping it up the way that I think that we are, there will be two more books at least.
Awesome.
And one of
Yeah.
my friends has already demanded a like little novella side story of certain characters. So there will be two more books and maybe a novella of side characters.
Oh
So
my goodness. That's
yes,
so exciting. Have you got the cover sorted for book two?
mostly it is
Yeah.
pretty much there. I'm just getting the
Mm.
fine-tuned little details on it now.
Yep.
But it's
Yep.
obviously I've got the don't know if we can see it
Yeah, that's all right. I
there. That's
can,
the first one.
yeah, yep.
Um,
I'll insert a picture of it in. I can take a photo of my copy. So
yeah,
sorry.
perfect. But yes, it will be similar vibes, different
Yes.
colors.
So the
Um,
colors are mostly, I'll just describe it in case people aren't watching
yeah,
the video version of this, but the cover's got a I guess a fallen goddess.
yeah, like a
So
falling goddess. Yeah.
yes, with so it's like a silhouette of yeah, a character with some big black wings coming
Hmm.
off them, and it says Pantheon of Life, and then it's blue, a dark blue and a dark purple,
Hmm.
around the figure, very
Yep.
like action falling.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes, in
yes,
the
it's
midst of
cool.
falling, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, book two is pretty much done. I'm hoping to get it done. Actually, that's my goal for this week. So hopefully we'll have a
Yeah.
cover reveal
Yes.
pretty soon, but it's
Oh, so
very
exciting.
exciting. It's
Yeah.
like I said, it's a bit the storyline is a bit darker.
Yep.
So the cover is going to be a little bit more like
Yeah, even darker.
intense, I think.
Yeah. It's
Some more like
cool.
intensity in the colors that are there.
Yep.
And yeah,
Mm.
some little bits and pieces, but
Yep.
yeah, I'm
Same
excited.
title and everything. Will it be the Pantheon of something, or are we not? We don't know too much yet.
It is not going to be Pantheon of.
Yep.
It's I keep switching this in my mind too, but I think it's going to
Mm.
be House of Death,
Yep. That's
which
cool. That's so
yes,
cool. So we've got life,
yes,
then we've got death,
then
and
we have
then
Death,
what's going
and
to
then
happen
we
in
get
the third?
something else.
Something
Yep.
else. Yep. This is an exclusive then. We're hearing this
Yeah.
first.
Yes,
Thank you for
exactly.
sharing. Oh my
Of
goodness.
course.
That's so exciting. So, House of Death, I could imagine maybe some black and some red
Mhm.
maybe coming into the cover, but I'm just speculating.
You've got some good instincts
Oh,
there.
there we go. It must be in the field that I work in.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like,
No.
makes sense. You've probably got
If
the
I was
conceptual
designing
and
it,
vision board. Yeah.
what would I do? Yeah, something
Yeah.
about death, but that's very, very exciting. Oh my
Yes.
goodness, I can't wait to see what's going to happen in a cover reveal in particular. I
I'm
am excited.
excited. I'm
Oh,
nervous because it's a
yeah,
um
happening.
no spoilers, but it's
Yeah.
it's a little bit of a risky move for a second book.
Yep.
And it's shorter for that
Yep.
reason because there's some really pivotal stuff in there.
Yep.
But I think I hope that that lands with readers and
Yeah.
they kind of it's I'm obsessed with it. I love it more than Pantheon to be honest, but
That's
I
awesome.
also there's a lot
Mm.
of there's
It's been
some
some
necessary
evolution.
steps back before we go into some steps forward. So,
Okay.
if
Well,
that
I'm
makes sense.
curious. Yeah, no, I'm curious about that. But to say that you love it more than
Mm,
Pantheon shows an evolution, but it
yeah,
also gives me hope when I get onto eventually getting onto Still Waters Run Deep 2.
true. Yeah,
Like that,
it's
I'll love it more than the first one.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's hard to fathom, right? Because you're like,
Yeah.
no, this is my first baby. This is how do I love anything more?
I can't.
Um, and I didn't believe that I could, and like from a technical but also an emotional,
Yeah.
in the two different lenses. Technical, I think, I love Pantheon. I love how I set it up.
Yeah.
I think I have learned so much as a writer. And I have learned so much as a storyteller that I feel like um, even the ending of where I finished my first draft of book two was something that it took me like three or four revisions to get Pantheon to that standard, right?
Yep.
So it's something that I feel like a stronger writer now.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, absolutely. Because you've spent a
just
lot of time perfecting.
yeah,
Yep.
like honing the craft, right?
Yep.
And continuing to learn and continuing to adapt.
Yep.
Um, But then on an emotional level, I was like, after writing Pantheon, I was like, um, there was so much in Asriel that I didn't feel like I could get any deep, like not that we couldn't
Mm.
go any deeper with her, but there was so much that I'd already, I think, started to explore with her in book one that I was like, oh, this character arc is like so, it means so much to me or whatever. And then having written
Mm.
the second book, I'm like, no, this character arc means everything to me.
Yeah.
Like I cannot, like, I
So
like, I
good.
cannot
Yeah.
convey, um, you know,
How important it
how
is.
much this
Yeah.
character means to me now after this second
Amazing.
book,
Yeah.
and the journey that you go on with them in the second book is just
It's a
like you
lot of
can't.
care being put into it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely.
To shape her. Oh, might not be able to hear, but it is raining a bit heavily.
Yes, here too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's here. It's everywhere. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So if you hear lots of rain, sorry everyone. But yeah, we're getting a bit of a downpour here, which is probably much needed after a lot of hot days that we've just
Yeah,
had
the
anyway.
last couple of weeks for sure.
It's been terrible, but that's summer for you. That's summer for you.
Mm,
I did want to quickly go back to the inspiration behind Pantheon of
mhm,
Life, which I'm sure you've probably heard this a million times, but what inspired you to write it and everything like that.
mm,
But I'm curious if the idea came to you, like it's always been with you when you thought about what your first book that you would write would be,
mm.
or maybe it was something that came off the fly after being inspired by a particular event or anything like that.
Um, it it's Pantheon is not my first fully finished manuscript. It was actually just the first one to see the light of day.
Yep.
So
Mm.
it's something that it wasn't what I envisioned to be my first. I don't think I knew what my first one would really be.
Yeah.
Um, but it was something that um I think I was writing something else. I was writing, and I think this one still might see the light of day, but I was
Okay,
writing
cool.
something else
I'm
that
excited.
was about have you ever watched Warehouse 13?
No, I
It's
don't even
essentially this
know.
show that was like um these like a special section of the FBI is dedicated
Oh
to
yeah.
guarding this warehouse that is full of these like magical, ancient, mystical items that all
That's
have
so
different
cool.
things in
I'll
them.
have to
And
check this
it
out.
was kind of like not the FBI vibe, but it was like, it was this world where there was these items and
Yeah.
they did different things and I was writing that sort of system and I was probably like halfway through. And then I just like kind of stopped and I was like, um I read something about um this other character that existed within Greek mythology, and the name Asriel was mentioned in one sentence. And so she was she is a character that exists, I guess, in the scope of Greek mythology, but as this like so there's nothing to her. I was
Yep.
like, tell me more about this goddess of death, and I was
Yeah.
searching everywhere for her, and there
Goddess
was
of
just
Death.
nothing. And she was always she was mentioned as this goddess of death in this story with essentially this the story was about this man who um basically like displeased her so much that she like bound him to her service because he just kept killing people and she was like stop killing people like
That's my job.
um yeah, and so she bound him to their service and initially that didn't even make it into the story, but I was really inspired by the potential of their relationship
Yeah.
and the potential of like his
Great idea.
servitude to her
Yeah.
almost. Like I was really, that was the initial thing that like grasped me. And
Yeah.
then I started thinking about I did a little bit of like plotting of like, okay, if I'm going to go into the Greek mythology, like let me establish like what my family tree looks like. Because we
Yep.
know in Greek mythology there's a lot of like Apollo is this person's son, but over here he's also their brother. And it's like
It's
there's so many variations of who they
it's a
are to
lot.
who.
Yeah. I get
And I was like,
confused.
let me figure out a family tree that
Yeah.
works and makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, and the more I sort of played with that, the more I was like, okay, like I think this is what happened with Asriel, and I had the prologue first, and then I wrote the prologue on the same day that I did the big family tree mapping and everything, and then I had no story, and I was like, I don't know what happens, but I just know that she falls because
Yeah.
I'd also had like this bit. this bit of like another story that I'd been obsessed with that I kept coming back with over the years of this idea of this like this falling angel or something
Yeah.
like
Just
and
like a
that
scene.
story. Yeah,
Yeah.
just a scene that I kept coming
Yeah.
back to. And I was like, okay, we'll chuck that in and we'll see what happens. And then initially I was like, okay, I think at the time I was like, enemies to lovers is that's the way we're gonna do enemies to lovers, and it's gonna be, and I was gonna I was like, this is gonna be spicy too. It's gonna be like a
Right.
big spicy
Like,
romantasy,
yep.
and there's some spice in there, but
Yep.
I definitely didn't go where I thought I was gonna go with it. Um,
Yeah, and I'm glad there's a mixture. I mean,
yeah,
if it was going to be marketed as a very spicy novel, it could have that potential as well. But I think
hmm
sometimes with those books, there's room for more of the development of the plot and the scenario, and there's
yeah,
some big themes that come from her character that I think have been explored so well, but
mm,
also exploring the physical side of her sexuality in particular, but the
absolutely.
characters that are around her too. So
And it's
people love
also
it.
like I had to ask the question of like, again, dealing with immortal lives here. If I danced around the sexual elements, if I danced around like closed door, I think
Hmm.
it would feel somewhat dishonest.
Yep.
Because I'm like,
Yeah.
well, why, like, she's not going to be like hesitant around these sorts of things. She's lived for
No,
thousands of years. Like, she's not, like, of course, she's going to be open and like transparent about like all these
exactly.
things. So to do a fade to black in the world inspired by Greek gods felt
Yeah.
kind of dishonest, to
Yep.
be honest. So I was like,
Yep.
okay, like let's do a bit of a challenge. I'd never really done it before, so I was kind of
Yeah.
excited to learn and force
Give
that
it a
out onto the
go.
page as well.
Yes,
Um,
I can imagine that was something, and I'm the same as you, where
mm,
I do lean towards the fade to, well, who am I kidding? That's all I do is fade to black.
yeah.
It would be, I am inspired to, well, by your writing and even SK May's writing in particular
Mm.
when it comes to the intimacy. There's a lot more to it that there's a craft to it.
There's
And I
some things
think,
to explore, yeah.
yeah, I think the way that you write it in particular hit the nail on the head of what I could
Oh,
expect it
thank you.
without it. Yeah, honestly, I was
Yeah.
I was impressed, and I'm surprised that you said that this is like your first attempt at writing scenes
Yeah,
like that.
and
Yeah.
it was like I had to kind of just like turn my mind off and be like, we're just gonna write it and we're gonna ignore the fact that
Yep.
anybody is reading this, and
Yes. So
then
true.
we'll
So true.
refine it and we'll make it, more, right? Like I think,
Yeah.
and look,
Push
I'm a
past it.
lover of like some just solid smart books.
Yep.
I am like, you put a
Yeah.
good one in front of me, I don't care if there's no character development
People
in
love
there. It's
it.
great.
Yeah. It serves a
Um,
purpose. Yeah.
but I think there's levels for different genres and levels for depending on what you want to achieve. And I
Yeah.
having it be so character driven, I was like, it needs to exist because we're dealing with Greek gods and
Yeah.
mature themes, but it needs to also serve the purpose of the characters as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Which
Sex is a
I
part of
hope
life.
that it did.
Yeah, and it's a big
So
part of a character development too,
yeah.
in the genre that you're writing as well. Probably where I write is more on the young adult side, so it's not
hmm
as going to be, it's definitely not going to be as explicit,
Yeah.
um, in my opinion. There are other novels out there which do go into that, but for me, with
Yeah.
YA, I'll keep it to fade to black.
Well,
But we're
that's
in the
it.
new, yeah, in the new adult section, and I think
Mm,
it is becoming a lot more empowering for
mm,
women to, if I'm thinking that, linking it to how the community that we're in is
mm.
a largely female dominated community, and writing and promoting books that do have a lot more, yeah, like spice and things like that.
Mm,
It's empowering, and it's important to kind of reclaim a bit more of
yeah.
sexual liberation in that kind of thing.
I'm a huge advocate of it, and so is Asriel. Um,
Yes, yeah,
but yeah,
yeah. It's
yeah,
important.
I agree. I think there's, people wouldn't be asking for it. They wouldn't be selling if it wasn't landing with
Yeah,
people, right? And
yeah.
that's why I think like, you know, even dark romance, which we know can push quite a lot of boundaries. There's a
Yep.
lot of, if you saw them, if you met that person in real life, you'd be like, I'm gonna run now.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh.
but like, but I
Yeah.
think, even dark romance, which I'll admit, like, there's some things I vibe with. There's a lot of things that I don't, but I
Yeah.
think the importance of it is valid. I
Yep.
think there's a lot of people that get a lot out of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
Doesn't have to be your cup
that
of tea. You just move on.
exactly.
Yeah.
I think it wouldn't be so successful if there weren't people taking something that they needed from it.
Yes,
Um,
exactly. Exactly. I totally agree with you there. Yeah. Yeah.
so
Mm.
yeah, and get me started on how, women's interests are always like belittled and critiqued, but um don't do
Let's,
that. But
we'll save that for
I
another
think
episode.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's important. It's
Yeah.
important. Yeah.
I totally agree with that, with women's interests and
Mm,
literature that is focused, marketed towards women tends to be, yeah, infantilized and mocked
yeah.
and made fun of
Yeah.
when actually it's just because it's written by a woman doesn't mean that it's
Hmm.
any less. I mean, duh, like I'm not saying anything
Well,
groundbreaking, but
yeah.
stereotypes
This
remain.
is this is one of the main concepts that I wrote my thesis on in the end is like I did a work of writing
Mm,
as my thesis submission. Um,
nice.
and it was specifically focusing on like, why does the inclusion of a romantic element make something in the fantasy genre specifically less fantasy?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like
Oh, totally.
why does every conversation that I have with a man who reads fantasy and they ask me what I read, and I tell them, and they say, "Oh, try this. It's real fantasy." And it's always like
Uh,
Game of Thrones, which I've
mm,
read and I liked, and it was fantastic, great. But
cool.
like, that's not the pinnacle of real
Yeah.
fantasy. You know what I
Mm,
mean? Like, just because this
absolutely.
has a pretty good romantic through line
Yep.
does not mean it is not a good fantasy. Like,
Exactly. Exactly.
so,
Just because there's going to be a bit of divergence from the plot with
mm,
some romantic sprinkling. Well, is it really a divergence when it serves the character development and
exactly.
intimacy of two characters together?
Yeah.
Um, I'm conscious that probably I will be mindful of not taking too much more of your time. And it says we've got 6 minutes left.
Oh gosh.
Before we wrap up a little bit, I did want to quickly ask about where people can find you on social media in both the
Mm,
capacity as Jade Andrews and also maybe give a shout out to Coven Press and all the things happening
yes.
around there.
Yeah, Coven Press is on both Instagram and Facebook at Coven Press HQ. I give us a follow because we've got a lot of educational content as well that we put out, as well
Yep.
as some good inspirational writing stuff. And obviously, we
Yeah.
plug our services occasionally too.
Yep.
And covenpress.com.au to check out our website.
I'll put that here.
And Jade Andrews is at jade.andrews.author on Instagram. I
Yep.
am
I'll put that
too
in.
lazy to have developed a Facebook just yet.
No,
Um,
it's one of those things that I feel like I just have it as like an accessibility thing in case people
yeah,
really don't want to use anything else. It's connected to my Instagram. So,
yeah,
but Facebook, it's a bit
yeah,
weird.
I know. So I'll get around to that. And yes, Jade Andrews is hopefully going through a rebrand in time for Clunes as well. So hasn't
Wow.
there should be some new content coming up
Oh my
soon.
goodness. This has been
It's
a
all
really
happening.
good chance to catch up at a particularly important time in your
Mm,
marketing and um release date schedule because I didn't
yeah.
realize before chatting to you that book 2 is imminent. I mean,
Yes.
depending on how things
That's
go,
yeah. That's why when
but
you were like, let's do, because we originally
15th
obviously
or
had an
something.
earlier date, and
Yeah.
I was like, sure, I can make that work.
Oh
Having
my
like
God.
been not sleeping and trying to like write the second
Oh,
book, and I was like, yes, this is fine. And also
I
like
appreciate
yeah,
it
like
so much.
launching Coven Press and everything. But
It
there was a
worked
lot at
out.
once, and it's
Wow.
it's looking like it's lining up.
You're
So
doing it. And I had this
yeah,
chat with my mum actually last night when we were talking about some other stuff to do with like things lining up, and it's almost like you don't
mm,
even think about what happens if it's going right. It just kind of goes, yeah,
yeah,
this is it. This is what's happening.
yeah,
Everything's spiritually aligned if you're inclined to think that way. And I
yeah.
think that when it does happen like that, you feel it in your soul that
Mm.
everything has it's working out and it is what
That's
it
the way it
is.
was
And you
supposed to
feel,
be.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's the way it's supposed to be. And the timing is right with all this. And I really appreciate you taking your time in your busy schedule, which I didn't realize how busy
No,
it
I
was to come and
I
chat with
am so
me.
thankful for the opportunity. It's a lot of fun. I love jumping in and chatting and
Yapping. I
yeah.
love a good yap. I love hearing about what goes on in people's
Mm,
lives when it comes to the indie life and publishing life. Everyone who is listening, you got to
so
check
different.
out. You got to check out Jade Andrews. You got to check out the Pantheon of Life and the House of Death.
House of Death.
House of Death
Yes.
when it comes out.
Yeah.
And, I'll make sure to plug some release dates and everything like that. Also, Clunes Booktown
Clunes.
Festival, 22nd and 23rd of March, if you're
Yes, it will
in
be
the
the
area.
official release of House of Death. So
You
get your
gotta
copy
get there.
there.
Yeah, I gotta get down. Hopefully I'm free. So I'll have to check that out. Oh my
Be a lot
goodness.
of fun.
Lots of things coming up in your world.
Mm,
Amazing work with everything, writing as well as launching all these wonderful indie author services at Coven Press HQ. So you've got the marketing, social media marketing in particular.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Things
Yes,
like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Bunch of
Yeah.
social media things, but kind of talk to us about what you need and we can
We can
figure
do
out a
it.
pathway. Yeah.
Yes. So also editing in particular
Hmm.
is a big process.
Yep.
And it's a team, isn't it? Like it's yourself
Yes.
and
There's
um
four of us at the
four.
moment, but we've also got a lot of other editors that we've sort of got the extended, reaches out to as well and cover designers. So we've got
Oh,
quite a few people to
perfect.
call on to. So
One-stop
yeah.
shop with everything, but
Yes.
also to drop in if
Exactly.
you need certain things and also to check out your
Even
page
just
for,
advice.
yeah, advice.
Yeah.
And I think you're a wealth of advice with everything that you have experienced and seen and
Mm,
dealt with. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
it's been an amazing journey. And thank you so much for offering your time to come and speak with me and offer all of your advice and insights into everything that you do. That's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, no problem at all. But yeah, no, seriously, thank you so